Hello, I'm Anthony. Welcome back to the Essential Guide to System Configuration in Cubase. This is pretty much the Mount Everest of system configuration videos because today I'm going to show you how to manually edit the MediaBay database itself. It's an extremely advanced subject. If you're not comfortable with running SQL queries against databases or really pretty clued up about how your system works, please don't do this stuff without being very confident that you're not going to break it. As an absolute minimum, take backups of all of the folders that you're going to be touching today. And it's also pretty much a prerequisite that you've seen previous videos in this series where I talk about the MediaBay and VST presets. I'm going to be using a lot of that information today. What I really want to do is manually edit the information in the MediaBay for my own purpose. I'm going to show you a nifty trick where you can manually create your own subcategories. There are a few caveats. It's not a perfect system at all, and it's incredibly clunky, but it does work. And I'll also show you how to coordinate all of the various MediaBay databases together so that you can update your ratings across all of the various applications in the system. Now, a quick word on that point. With Halion 7, Steinberg have finally begun the process of consolidating all of their MediaBay databases. In the roaming folder, a new file has appeared, the Steinberg MediaBay server. Ultimately, ignore the MBS one, I created that myself earlier. Ultimately, this MediaBay here that I've selected is going to be the one-stop shop for all Steinberg MediaBay products. At the moment, it's only working on Halion 7 products, but ultimately the hope is that we won't have all of these different databases to manage. Everything will be in a single location. For the time being, that's not the case. And so the stuff that I'm going to show you today, as well as giving you a really good introduction to how everything works under the hood, hopefully should give you some tools to help you fix problems that you might have in your system if you want to perform like housekeeping operations across the entire system so that all of the different applications, Halion and Groove Agent and Cubase itself, all speak the same language. Now, another quick note to talk about today is that I'm going to have to kind of slightly hack it. I can't have Cubase open and edit the database at the same time because I talk to you through Cubase, through the control room in Cubase. So what I'm going to do is create a copy of the MediaBay file in the Cubase folder, and I'm going to edit the copy itself. It's a very, very subtle change. There's hardly any difference between one and the other. I'm simply going to be working on this copy, which means I'll be able to open it in the database application while Cubase is running. You won't be able to, if you're going to edit this file yourself directly, which is what you're supposed to do, make sure you close Cubase first. Now, there's a couple of programs that you're going to need to download in order to do the stuff today. The first one is called DB Browser for SQLite. It's a free application. I'll put a link in the description below. Here it is, DB Browser for SQLite, and I'm going to open Database. I'm going to navigate to my roaming folder where Cubase is installed, and ordinarily I would click on MediaBay3.db. Cubase would be very unhappy with me if I did, so I'm going to open the copy instead. This is the database. This is the entire database for the MediaBay, and all of the information that you're interested in is in this media table. So we're going to execute our first SQL command, select everything, which is star asterisk, from media, go. You can press F5 or press the play button, and that's just downloaded the entire MediaBay database, 165,000 and odd records. Now it's a little bit unwieldy to deal with 165,000 records all simultaneously. Can you see the size of this database table? Most of the columns, the vast majority of the columns in this database are of no interest to you at all. So I've been through and I've picked out what I think are the most interesting columns. And so we're going to trim this query down a little bit to only look at the columns of the database that we're interested in. I'm also going to restrict my query to a single record. I'm going to jump back over to Cubase, something you won't be able to do if you're following along this example side by side. I'm going to search for the word jumping and get my attribute tags. There we go. I'm looking for jumping bean. It's a synth lead analog sound. It's a Halion SE preset There you can see Hallian SE. I just picked it because there's only a single VST preset with the word jumping bean or the words jumping bean in it, so it's going to be really easy for me to search for. I'm going to use this as an example, one of my examples today. And here's my edited query. Let's have a look at it. So instead of saying select everything, select star, I've now added a comma delimited list of columns that I'm interested in. Only these columns are going to come back. I'm still selecting from the media table, but now I have this where clause, which means I don't want all 165,000 records of the database. I'm only interested where the media type is VST preset. Here's the media type. You can see most of the records in this database are actually audio files. I'm only interested in VST presets, and the URL, which is this long string here, must contain the words jumping bean. So if we do a like query, it's like a wildcard. Like is the SQL query for performing wildcard searches, and you need to use these percentage signs at both ends of the word. And now we're going to find all of the records that contain jumping bean. So let's execute that. And here's the single record that's come back. So this is our preset. Is our media rating. So this is our 3-star rating. It's of synth lead type. Musical instrument is subcategory. So here's synth lead pipe analog. Pipe is a very standard SQL delimiter. So you can see that the musical instrument in the database behind the scenes contains the category. So this is category pipe subcategory. And here you can see all the character flags. I'll just jump back over to Cubase to show you the character flags. Obviously you won't be able to do this, but here they all are. When you open the character editor, you get all of these little radio buttons, but every one of these behind the scenes, Cubase understands that some of these, like thin and rich, are paired together. There's nothing you can do. You can't define your own characters. Cubase gives you all of this. But when you select all of these various different radio buttons and say OK, that turns into a pipe delimited list on the database, and it looks like that. Let's perform an update. Here's going to be my update query. Update media, set media rating to 4 stars, where the media type is a VST preset and the URL is jumping bean. I've already determined that this is going to get me down to a single record. I could have said where ID equals 143838, and that would have tied it down to a specific record. So this ID column is unique for each instance in the database, and that's really the best record to be performing queries on. But I'm not talking about SQL best practices here. I'm trying to give you a good flavor of the kinds of things that we can do with this database. If I execute this command now, all I have to do is select the text that I want to execute, and in any SQL browser, selected text is the only text that will execute. So this first query will be ignored, and now just the update will be performed. So if I press go, down at the bottom you can see query executed successfully. We've just updated the media table. Now I'm working on a copy here, but not to worry. I'm going to close the SQL browser down, which is essential. You have to close this DB browser down. It's going to ask me if I want to save my database. So you can see that I'm currently working on a copy. Not to worry. We say yes. Now I'm going to shut Cubase down. The microphone will cut out, so I'll do this next part silently. I'm just going to flip the copy back to the original file, relaunch Cubase, and you'll see that now Jumping Bean has 4 stars. Here we go. If you open MediaBay within about 30 seconds of launching the application, this is what you'll see. It's basically scanning its database, loading all of that information back into memory. It always happens behind the scenes, so if you leave it more than a minute, you wouldn't see this happening. But here we are, database refreshed. Jumping Bean is now 4 stars. Let's do something a little bit more advanced. Get rid of that filter. And now I'm going to search for the word doll. And I want to filter by plugin presets. So there's a preset here. This is a Hallian SE preset. The -1112 is a program. The one underneath Dolac sets is a layer, basically like a subcomponent inside Hallian. So it looks like there's 2 presets, but kind of really there's only one. But what I want to do is define a new subcategory, because there currently isn't a subcategory for the doll family of percussion instruments, and I want to create one. As you can see at the moment, we're working on the ethnic Asian subcategory. Now that's fine, but really I would like this to be a percussion doll. And as you can see, there's no doll there, and I can't manually edit this list. In fact, I can't even add values to this list. I can only manually edit the database behind the scenes. Now, in order to do this, you need a hack. What you need to do is choose a subcategory that isn't currently in use, but exists. So in the percussion category, for instance, there's a subcategory called boobam. Now when I get rid of all of my filters and go into percussion and choose boobam, that's the only instrument that comes back. So I've now basically identified the preset from the front end that I want to tag. Now I don't want it to be a boobam. To be absolutely honest with you, I don't even know what a boobam is. I'll look it up after I've made this video. But the important thing is that there weren't any in the database to start with. Now, I probably picked the most awkward example to give you by choosing the category. That's very deliberate because every single other category has a subcategory called other. If you clear your system down of all other subcategories, if you basically choose something else for all of these entries to be, then you've got this completely empty play pit that you can kind of wallow in. I'm going to show you how to do that a little bit later, but just for now we're going to stick with the boobam example. So I'm going to close Cubase down, reopen the database browser, and we'll carry on the story over there. So again, I've taken a copy of the database so that I can open it alongside Cubase. Cubase is running in the background so that I can talk to you. And here's my copy. And here's the query I just executed. So select all of these columns from media, where it's a VST preset and the URL contains the word doll. And sure enough, there they are. Doll Accents 112 and the layer underneath. Here's my boobam. So this is the value that I set manually in Cubase. This was the only option I had because I can't manually edit, add new ones. But now that I've got access to the database, I can edit that value. Now, unfortunately, I just had a pretty catastrophic system failure. So I've had to rebuild my example as close as I could possibly get to where I was previously. So I've kind of reverse engineered a lot of what you're seeing here. But basically, this is where we were. The Doll Accents 112 had been set to musical instrument percussion. So this is the subcategory percussion boobam. And I've got my query up and ready to go here. So I'm saying update the media table, and I'm going to set the musical instrument column to replace all instances of pipe boobam with pipe doll. So it's actually going to replace this text and leave the percussion alone. You can see that we've got this second entry down. I didn't change that in Cubase, so that's still set to ethnic Asian. I'm not performing an update across all instances of doll. I'm specifically looking for these boobams. That's why it's so important to do that tag in Cubase. I made sure that my entire system is completely clear of boobams, and then I set a boobam inside the interface using a subcategory to which I had access. In the back end, I can then perform system-wide updates on the entire database. You can see there's no other query, there's no other filter set on this query. Every single instance of boobam it finds is going to be replaced with the word doll. Now I'm going to run this and then we'll come back and talk a little bit more about that because there's another consequence for these system-wide updates. Let's do this one. Now you can see it took over 4 seconds to run then, and you can see that it's basically affected every single row in the database. Whilst that's true, that's just a function of how SQL replace works. What's actually happened is that only one record has changed. Let's have a look at our dolls again. And there we go. Boobam has been replaced with the word doll. When I load this back up in Cubase, you're going to see this as a new subcategory. It's going to appear. Just before we do, one more word to say about these mass updates. Boobam is perfectly fine for percussion because, as you saw on my system, there were no boobams anywhere. So that was a tag that was completely free for me to use. For all of the other subcategories, that's not the case. If you're going to use this kind of piggyback tagging, you need to find a tag that's usable. So in piano, for instance, just clicked on percussion. In piano, there's a flag called other. Well, I would never deliberately tag something with the other flag. It's kind of useless to me. It's not giving me any information. So I could clear all of those other flags down and then use it as my playpen. There's no other flag in the piano category available for my use. Well, what do I do with these 31 subcategories that are currently set to other, do I have to manually change every one of these? Well, either go through and audition every one of them and change them to either acoustic or electric, or you can do a mass update via the database. Let's jump back over there. If I do something like that, then that's going to do the job. So I'm basically moving all of those flags that have the word other somewhere else. I'm creating a new subcategory called unassigned. Cubase doesn't particularly understand what unassigned is. I can't use it in the application itself, but it will work as a filter. And then once I've got that filter set, I can then reset. I can basically filter on my unassigned flags. The important point is that I'm clearing down the other flag. I've used the Boobar example here because it's a single category, it's nice and convenient, but you are going to have to decide what piggyback mechanism you're going to use to start with the tag that you can then go into the database and edit manually as we've done here. So what I'm going to do now is close this browser down, flip the databases back over, reopen Cubase, and hopefully we should see this doll subcategory appear in Cubase. Let's do that. And here we are, search query doll plugin presets is our filter. Doll Access 112 has a subcategory of percussion doll, so it's visible. Cubase can see it. This only works for internal Steinberg presets, the VST sound presets Cubase can understand. If I was to save this preset as a VST3 file on my physical hard drive in the VST3 presets folder of my documents folder, Cubase wouldn't understand it. It would basically ignore it. It doesn't even appear in Cubase. So there is a restricted use case here. It's purely for your system sounds, for your VST sounds. With that caveat, it absolutely works. Here is the doll subcategory selectable as a filter. Let's have a look at one final use case. We've got a situation here where, and this is actually a real world example. I've been in communication with a patron of mine for the past few days who's been having a problem since they updated from Halion 6 to Halion 7. Now, if you lose all of your presets in that instance, or it appears that you've lost all of your preferences, your ratings that you've assigned painstakingly to all of your Halion 6 presets, it's because they're in different databases. Here's Halion 6's database, and here's the MediaBay 3 corresponding to Halion 6. What I'm going to do is copy it, paste it, and rename it to MediaBay 3 underscore H6. I'm then going to copy that file to a temporary location in my documents folder. Then in my Halion 7 folder, take a copy of my MediaBay 3 file. You can see I've already done it here. Copy this, paste that into the local, into my documents folder as well. So now those two databases are sat side by side. They are not touched by Cubase. I've copied them into a local directory where I can now play with them. I now need to open a new application, a second kind of SQL browser. And this one's called SQLite Studio. It's a different application. Now the interface for this one isn't as good as DB Browser in my opinion. So I use DB Browser for the most part when I'm doing general queries. But SQLite is better at talking to multiple databases simultaneously. And that's what we're doing here. What you need to do is head up into the database section and say add a database. You need to browse for each of the databases in turn. So I'm selecting H6. I don't want it to be permanent, so I'm going to untick this. Don't want to keep it in my configuration. Say OK, and then back up into add another database. This time choose H7. Once you've added your databases, you need to connect to them. So we connect to H6, select H7, connect to H7. And now we're ready to execute this update. Let's see what happens. Query finished in 1 second, rows affected 47,000. That's the entire database. So any ratings you've got in one database are going to get copied across to the other. Trust me that it works, but all of the data is there. Let's just say select star from media, just to see some of the data, F9 in this particular browser, and there it all is. So each one of the ratings, if you've updated them in 6 and you need them to be reflected in 7, these URLs are your friends. They're going to exist in both of those databases. So it's one of those things. I basically recommend that you baby step your way into SQL querying. Get these browsers installed. I'll put links to them both in the description below. And firstly, just start off with selects. You can't damage a database when you do selects. So just have a look at all of the different data, browse through the columns, see what different columns are relevant in audio files or VST files, track presets. There's so many different kinds of files in Cubase. And it's just a really fabulous way to see under the hood and try to understand how Cubase is configured. Then, like I've done in today with a couple of examples, just basically start pushing the boat out. In this particular case, now that I've run this update, what's going on? Oh, that's just an update. Okay. Now that I've run that update, I would basically be able to pick those database files up, move them back into the corresponding roaming folders, relaunch Cubase, and it will be completely oblivious that anything's ever happened. But suddenly all of your ratings are going to get updated in the proper application. Hope you enjoyed the video. Please hit like if you did. Cup of tea for me now. Thanks very much. See you later.